I don't know if it's the case for you, but every time I'm about to start a documentary project, I find myself struggling with figuring out the right visual style for the film. You know, it's kind of like being a painter and having an empty canvas in front of you and trying to decide which colors and which painting technique you should use. Luckily, with every film that I create, I feel like I'm getting a little better at it. And so today I would like to share my process with you of how I find the right visual style for my films. As you might have noticed if you've been watching the channel for a while, I'm in my new office. And the reason for that is because we moved our houses in Bali and man, it feels really good to have a dedicated space for work. But now let's talk about why you should be creating a visual style for your films and how to do it. In my opinion, every story is different. And by putting effort into creating a unique visual style for it, you're really making the story stand out and you're giving it justice. Plus, different styles will evoke different emotions in the viewer and also different relationship towards the character. For example, filming on wider lenses and closer to the character will reveal more of the environment that the character lives in, and it will make the viewer feel more immersed in the character's life. On the contrary, filming with longer lenses might create more of an observational feeling in the viewer. So as you can see, finding the right visual style for your film is very important. And now, let me show you how I go about it. So for me, everything starts with collecting inspiration. And my first stop is usually Vimeo. That's where I have my libraries and my collections. And depending on the genre of the film, and today we're gonna talk about short documentaries, I would go into my short documentaries or I would go into my visual inspiration collection and I would start looking through the films that I saved. And I would then choose the films that I feel they could be a good inspiration for the upcoming film, and I would put them all into my Moodboard board. And these might be different genres of film. You know, it might be obviously short documentaries, but these might also be commercials or branded content films. And these films might also have a different style, because at this point, I'm just collecting inspiration. Apart from Vimeo, I would also think about the directors and documentary filmmakers that I like, and I would go to their websites and I would try to find films that I feel might be a good inspiration for the upcoming project. And I would, for example, also go to Patagonia YouTube or North Face YouTube, because sometimes these brands have really good documentaries. And if I find one that I like, I'll definitely check the director and I'll go to their website and see what other films they did. When I feel like I've collected enough inspiration, I'll start filtering the films and I'll really only keep the films that I feel like would be a good fit for the upcoming project. Usually I'll end up with 3 to 4 films, and then from there I'll start developing the mood board, the tone, and the style of the film. So when it comes to style, I always try to think about the story first. You know, how do I want the film to feel? And it usually comes down to, do I want the film to be observational or do I want the film to be more immersive? For most of my documentaries, I prefer that immersive style because I feel like it gets the viewer closer to the character. Next would be the tone of the film, and again, I always go back to the story. What's the story like? Is it a positive, uplifting, bright story, or is it a story where the character goes through a lot of struggle? Depending on these, you might decide to choose a different style. And this doesn't go only for the film in general, but this could also be based on the scenes. You know, there might be a scene which is very dark, where the character is in a low place in their life. And so for that, you might decide to go with a very moody and dark tone, where there might be also a scene where the character is overcoming his or her obstacles. And you might then decide to go for a little brighter tone. Sometimes, together with the tone, I also start thinking about the music, and I'll start pulling out some references, and either I use them in the final film or I don't. But it just helps me to get into the mood of creating the tone and the mood board. When we talk about the mood board, I usually start by selecting the frames from the films that I've picked as an inspiration. And then another tool that I use is Frameset. Frameset is basically a database of films and commercials where you can search for inspiration based on your criteria. You can decide on the lenses, on the lighting. If you want to search for outdoor and indoor scenes, you can decide on the framing, and these features are all incredible. And I love using Frameset. But one of the features that I really enjoy using is their search engine, where you can upload a frame that you like, and then Frameset will provide you with similar frames. So this way I can basically choose the favorite frames from the inspiration films, upload them to Frameset, and then Frameset will provide me with similar frames, which I can then download, and I can really start putting together a mood board that will represent the film that I want to create. And if you would like to try Frameset, there's an affiliate link in the description of this video. As I said, I love using the platform because it simplifies and speeds up the whole process of finding inspiration, creating mood board, and choosing the right tone for my films. And for me, this process of finding the tone, the style, the mood board is a very organic process. Sometimes I might start with the mood board, sometimes I might start with the tone, sometimes I might start with the style. So don't feel like you just have to do it in the exact same way as I mentioned it, but try to find your own flow that gets you inspired. All right, so you've collected the inspiration, you've created your mood board, you found a tone, and the next step for me is to really deciding on the lenses that I want to shoot the project on and the proximity to the character. So when I'm deciding on the lenses for a project, I always try to think about how do I want the viewer to experience the story? Do I want the viewer to experience a story as someone who's observing it from a distance, or do I want to immerse the viewer in the story? And usually for me it's more about the immersion, and for that reason I usually go with wider lenses between 24 to maybe 50 millimeter in focal length. And for the past 3 years probably I've been shooting on my Canon FD lenses whenever I can. Not every project is suitable for prime lenses, but when I can, I try to shoot on my Canon FD lenses, which obviously are vintage lenses and are prime lenses. Recently, I've also started shooting on zoom lenses again, because I can see the benefit of having a zoom lens for documentary on your camera. However, I always try to use this zoom lens with intentionality. And what I mean by that is that whenever I have a zoom lens on my camera, I try to be intentional with the focal lengths that I use on that zoom lens. And usually I set these focal lengths prior to even starting the project. It could mean that I'll be shooting on 24, 35 and 50 millimeter focal lengths, and then I'll try to stick to those while I'm on the zoom lens. The second thing that lenses provide you is a characteristic look. I don't like a very clean and sharp look, so when I'm shooting on Canon FD lenses, which are vintage lenses, that's basically sorted because they are softer and they have a little more character. When I'm shooting on my zoom lens, which currently is the Sigma 24-70 f2.8, I like to use 1/4 or 1/8 Pro Mist in front of the lens to just give it a little more character. Another step that I try to do is I always try to decide on the camera movement, and again, it's intentionality, prior to shooting the project. So this is all in pre-production phase. Because in my opinion, camera movement should be intentional, because movement can also create emotions in the viewer. And to be honest, the more I shoot, the less I find myself moving the camera. I'm really being pulled to static camera shots, or just a little bit of a, handheld shake when you want that. Because these shots will then allow you to really use the benefit of camera movement, for example, for dynamic scenes. So if you're shooting sports, obviously you might want to move your camera and get dynamism into your film. But if you will be moving your camera the whole film, then the dynamic camera movement will actually lose its effect. So really think about how you want to make the viewer feel, and you can also come up with few rules. I, for example, always try to decide on how will I capture establishing shots. Are they going to be shot on tripod? Are they going to be shot handheld? Are they going to be shot on wider lenses, or are they going to be shot on zoom lenses? And then I also try to think about how am I going to portray the character. So Am I going to be close to the character with wider lens, or am I going to be more observational and I'm going to stay maybe on a 50 or 85 millimeter lens, a little further from the character? In general, these are the two rules I always try to think about, and you can come up with more rules. You could come up with rules for interviews, especially if you're shooting more interviews within your project. You could also come up with rules for example, portrait shots. That's something that we did on a recent project in Africa because we wanted to create portrait shots that are a little unusual. And I think we've managed to do that quite well. And the last step I do when it comes down to finding the right visual style for your film is lighting. So I always try to think about lighting, and usually, with documentaries, you will be working with a lot of natural light. But even with natural light, you can decide on the time of the day that you're gonna shoot, on the mood that you're gonna create with this lighting. If you're gonna shoot everything backlit, if you're gonna use silhouettes, if you're gonna use soft light or hard light. And obviously it's great to come up with these rules or ideas, but you also have to be flexible because you might never know what the weather on the day will be. You might never know how the location is going to look. And so you have to be flexible and you have to be adaptable. The way I usually go about this is really trying to figure out what will be the lighting situation in the location that I'm going to be filming. And for example, I know that in Central Africa, where I did few projects, when you are there in the dry season, you always have this kind of a mist throughout the sky. And this basically means that you will never get a clean sunset, but the sun will disappear behind the dust, behind the mist. So you will never get that harsh sunset light. And this helps you then to adapt and to come up with visual style and, lighting, not lighting approach, but maybe lighting scenarios that will help you support your project. Another example could be shooting in Philippines in rainy season, which was something I did 2 weeks ago. And because of that, I kind of had to acknowledge that there might be days that will be full of rain. And so we want to take the most advantage of the weather because we can't control the weather. And so for those days, we might decide to shoot inside and maybe bring in 1 or 2 small lights and try to create lighting setups inside the house that might simulate an afternoon hour. So if I was to recap these points, find inspiration first, then go into finding the right style, creating mood board and tone. Then I think about the lenses, and then I think about the camera movement and lighting. Now, if you have any questions or any suggestions, let me know in the comment section below. And all of this prep is very important, but it's not everything. There's also a lot of practical skills that you need to have as a documentary filmmaker. So if you would like to learn more about those, check this video right here. That's it for today, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.